couple years ago when I was still a student at UCLA. I graduated 2 years ago, and that's a little bit bigger than LSU, believe it or not. We've got 40,000 students there. And I was a student there, and I chose the school because I wanted to go to the most pro-life school possible. That's a joke. UCLA is very liberal, very, not just liberal, but they're very in support of abortion, and from the administration to the faculty, but a lot of the students just don't know. And that's what I quickly learned when I got to the campus. But anyways, one day I was giving a speech, a little talk at a church nearby in Beverly Hills, this really swanky area. And I was in the little parish hall behind the church giving this talk. And in the middle of my talk, and it was a pro-life talk, this woman walks into the room. And she's tall, thin, and blonde. She looks very Los Angeles. And she's actually holding a small dog, like she came from the set of Legally Blonde. And she's leaning in the back of the room, and she's kind of leaning against the wall and kind of like grimacing at me. And I remember thinking, okay, maybe, she had a bad day, or, she got stuck in traffic or something. She's just grumpy, something's going on with her, who knows. But after my talk was over, I found out because she came up to me, and she shook my hand, and she introduced herself as a member of the Planned Parenthood Federation of America's Board of Directors. And I said, oh, hello, so nice to meet you. Good to see you here at church. No, I didn't say that, but I said, nice to meet you. How are you doing? And she said, oh, it's good to meet you, Lila. I saw a flyer that you would be speaking here, and I live, close by, and I thought I had to stop by and talk to you. She said, and I thought I had to stop by and talk to you and give you some advice as a mom. It's funny that she would say, as a mom, when she's advocating for what we know is the very violence that denies mothers their motherhood, that robs mothers of their motherhood, fathers of their fatherhood. And she said, I'd like to give you this advice. And I said, well, what would that be? What would your advice be? And she said, you know what, young lady, in your speeches and in the media or wherever you are, you have to stop saying something if you want to be taken seriously. You have to stop saying, and I said, well, what would that be? And she said, you have to stop saying the phrase pro-abortion. Say pro-choice. And I said, okay, well, why? Why? What's so wrong with saying pro-abortion? What's wrong with being pro-abortion? What's wrong with abortion? And she said, well, it's just a very difficult decision. That's all. Abortion's a very difficult decision. So to say you're pro-abortion is just a very difficult decision. And I said, well, why? Why is abortion such a difficult decision? What makes abortion so difficult? And the Planned Parenthood Federation of America board member said, well, it's just a very offensive phrase to say pro-abortion. It's offensive. And I said, well, why? What's so offensive about abortion? What's so offensive about the phrase pro-abortion? And we went around and around in circles, and she kept saying these words, difficult and offensive and personal and hard. And I kept asking again and again, why? What's so wrong? What's so wrong with abortion that this phrase would make you uncomfortable? And she never could answer my question. And I quickly realized that the reason that she was so resisting this answering the question, what's so wrong with abortion, is because if she did, this Planned Parenthood Federation of America board member did, she would be looking head-on her life's work contradiction, the contradiction of the work she'd given her life to. She said she'd gotten involved with Planned Parenthood in the 80s as a sex educator. She'd been involved with the organization for many years. And this contradiction that abortion goes against the very heart of what she claims to be fighting for, which is empowerment of women, which is freedom, which is reproductive justice. These great terms and phrases, choice, when really we know that abortion enslaves millions of women across our country and is a great injustice to millions of innocent and completely vulnerable children in the womb all across our country every year. This is why we're here today. This is the truth that we know. I pray for this woman and the many others like her who are blinded, who look at abortion and think of terms like freedom, reproductive justice, choice, and aren't seeing the truth for what it is, the violence for what it is, and seeing the way that women and men and families and our society is so wounded, is so violenced in every way, not just physically, but spiritually, emotionally, in every way, because of this great violence that we've allowed in our wonderful country. Mother Teresa, that humble nun from Calcutta, who won a Nobel Peace Prize. And she was honored and acclaimed by so many across the world. She captured people's attention, this little nun. And one day in 1994, she got up before the President Clinton himself, and Hillary Clinton, who you might know. I mean, when I was growing up, he was kind of said in hushed tones at the dinner table, like he was some sort of bad word. And that was because of his record on partial birth abortion and things like that. He was a very pro-abortion president. My parents were very pro-life. But this little humble nun from Calcutta stood up at the National Prayer Breakfast in 1994 and said to this very pro-abortion president, and the second to only our current president, and said, "The greatest destroyer of peace in the world today," and this is the expert on peace, Mother Teresa, "the greatest destroyer of peace in the world today is the cry of the innocent unborn child." And there you can imagine the quiet that fell over that room. Many who were fighting in politics for abortion and abortion rights. But the greatest destroyer of peace is the cry of that little child. And why is that? It's because we cannot have peace, the peace that we long for as a nation, and the peace, that desire for peace unites everyone, from every political party, from every creed. People want peace. People want peace so that they can live their lives. And yet, we cannot have peace in a great country, in this great country, unless we protect the rights of those that are the least among us, those that are the weakest. The purpose of laws, the purpose of rights is to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The weak can fend for themselves. But if you have a law that turns the strong against the weak, and victimizes the weak, then that law at its heart is an unjust law. And that's why the Supreme Court, when they ruled in 1973 in Roe v. Wade to make abortion somehow a constitutional right, at its heart the ruling is unjust, and we know that because it's turning the strong against the weak, and it's making the weak even more powerless. This fight that we're in, I believe, is the greatest fight for human rights that our nation has ever seen. And the whole purpose of the great American experiment was founded on certain ideals, certain human rights, ideals of these rights. And those were what? The rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, as was penned in our Declaration of Independence. And it's no surprise that we call it Louisiana right to life. We call this fight the right to life because that right to life is fundamental and first. You can't enjoy any other rights without the right to life. So this isn't just a matter of some cause that we feel personally attached to, or we get emotionally involved in, or we think is politically important. This is the cause, because all other rights are meaningless if we do not protect the right to life. And our society cannot be just, and it cannot thrive, and we cannot have peace, as Mother Teresa says, if we allow the killing of the weakest among us, if we allow laws that turn the strong against the weak. We cannot survive as a country. And all of the things that we think about and talk about in politics today, the economy and foreign affairs, all of this is meaningless if here at home, those that are the least of us, those that are the weakest, are not protected. All other rights become meaningless without that right to life. When I was a very young girl, I found out about abortion, and I didn't really understand what abortion was. Again, Bill Clinton had been mentioned a couple times at the dinner table in the 90s, and I was, 8 years old or whatever, and I thought it was something, something bad was going on. I heard about partial birth abortion. I didn't really understand what was happening, though. And I grew up in a family of 8 kids. Any big families out there? A few of us? It's awesome. My parents are obviously very loving on kids and very pro-life in that. And we were also homeschooled, so we aren't as weird as we look, but we were really encouraged to, pursue our dreams, and we had, all different kinds of traditional classes that we went to and everything, but we were also encouraged to really pursue what we found interesting, and we did a lot of great extracurriculars. And so I had this sense from a young age, because of loving parents and so many wonderful brothers and sisters and growing up in this safe environment, I had this sense that I could do anything, and that life was so good, this deep sense that life was so good. And children know that. Children who are loved on, there's nothing happier than a child who's loved, the way that they smile and laugh, because they're just enjoying life. And that's the other reason we're all here, because we love life, because life is such a beautiful gift. We're not just fighting for life for the child in the womb, but we're fighting so that child can get out of the womb and live its life and enjoy its life and be filled with joy and glorify God in that way. I mean, that's what this is all about. And so when I was about 9 years old, I really had my first encounter with abortion. I was looking for a book to read. I was a little bit of a bookworm, and I was looking on a shelf in our living room, and I pulled out a book called A Handbook on Abortion by Dr. and Mrs. Wilkie. And some of you may have heard of this book. Any of us, there's a couple in the back. On the cover was this very sober-looking woman who looked like she was upset, and I remember thinking it was kind of almost like sepia color, like black and white. And I remember thinking, oh, this looks like a very old book, you know, like a history book or something from the 80s. And so I pull it over. Not that was that long ago. For me, it was history. I pulled it over, not to offend anyone here. And it fell open. This old book fell open to the center. And there were these images. And in shock and horror, I closed the book and I pushed it away. I didn't want to keep looking at what I had just seen as a 9-year-old. And then gathering up a little bit of courage, I looked around and brought the book back, opened it up, and I looked again. And what I was looking at was the image of a tiny child, maybe 10 weeks old, with little arms, newly forming arms and legs, a newly forming little face, 10 weeks old, unborn, that had been the victim of an abortion. You can maybe imagine what this looked like. Some of you may have seen images like this. And in horror, I thought, is this real? Is this really happening? How could anybody do this to a baby? And I went and I showed it to my mom, and I said, is this real? Is this really happening? In my naivete? And she said to me, yes. And she closed the book and she said, yes, and that's abortion. That is the response of almost any child who hears about abortion, who comes across the image of abortion. Is that real? Is that really happening? How can this be? Because children know it best. We have so much to learn from them. I can learn from myself when I look back on that first sight and that first heartbreak of thinking, can this really be happening? How can we really let this happen? That image will always stay with me, and as I was 9 and very young and kind of asking my mom about it, I began to learn a few things, and I learned about abortion and Roe v. Wade. I learned about how there were 4,000 of these abortions every day in our country, over 1 million a year. And I learned about how just, within 10 miles of my childhood home, this safe place that I grew up in, there was a Planned Parenthood abortion clinic open for business, and that on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, they did abortions, killing about 30 children each day, almost 100 children a week, every week as I was growing up. And as I learned these things, my heart would just, and I got older, and I learned about other issues in the world, and I learned about, homelessness, and I went and got to go to Mexico with my family to do some house building, and we got involved in different, issues, learning about politics and foreign affairs and the AIDS crisis in Africa, and, immigration issues, and just so many issues, so many problems, so many causes, so many things to be concerned about. And yet I kept coming back to the image of that child. And I kept coming back to Mother Teresa because I learned about her at a young age as a young teenager, and I began to read some of her writings. Because in a nation, Mother Teresa says, where a mother can kill her own child, what is left but for you and for I to kill one another? And so at a young age, I said to God, God, use me to do something about abortion. Use me to somehow save lives, to do something to protect some lives. And it's a very dangerous prayer to ever ask God to use you to do anything for him, because he will. And many of you are here because you may have asked him to use you to do something for him, because our lives become so deeply meaningful in such beautiful ways that we could never have dreamed of before when we offer them to God. And as a young girl offering my life to God in this way and saying, use me to do something for you, I would have never dreamed as a 13, 14, 15-year-old that I'd be getting to do the things I've gotten to do in the last 10 years. I'm 24 now, that I would get to travel internationally, lead undercover investigations, work with, police departments and justice departments to expose abortion clinics, that I'd get to get evidence before Congress to vote for life. All of these things I would have never imagined. Speak on TV for life. But it wasn't my plan. It wasn't I didn't devise a career path or anything like this. It was just a simple prayer, God, use me. And again, getting up in the day, going about one's life, but asking God again, use me, do something with my life for you. And part of our deep pro-life conviction and our love of the unborn and our love of life is this deep conviction as well that each life has a special purpose. That we're not just born into the world for nothingness, just to wake up again, go to sleep again, live this life. We're purposed for something beautiful, for beautiful works of love for God. Each one of us in specific ways. Like God is intimately involved in not just the way that we're crafted in the womb. I mean, the psalmist David talks about how God knits us together in our mother's womb, and how gloriously, how wonderfully we're made. But it doesn't just stop there. The knitting and the making goes until our deathbed. When God is still not finished with us then, because he wants us forever with him in heaven. But all of this togetherness with God is an intimate walk with him to do beautiful things for him. That's what he wants for each one of us. And this conviction would grow in my heart. And so when I was about 15, I started Live Action, and it was really simple. It was me and a few friends in our living room at my home saying, okay, what are we going to do about abortion in San Jose, California, where I was born and raised? What are we going to do to reach people with the truth here? And it started out by just going to schools and churches and giving pro-life presentations and trying to talk to other students about life and abortion and all of these different things. And it really started so small and started just taking one step at a time. And then when I got to UCLA, as a bright-eyed 18-year-old freshman, all excited to do pro-life activism, that's when I started to really realize how much opposition there was, and also more than that, how much deceit there was about abortion. Because the truth sets us free. You've heard this before. It's a common phrase. The truth will set us free. And if you cannot have the truth, it's so you're bound in so many ways. And our culture is a story of that. So many lies are being told to our young women who go to get abortions, to our young men and to our young women about sexuality. And there's so much misunderstanding about what God's intention and plan, his beautiful plan for sexuality is. And so there's so much brokenness and disease and suffering and hurt out there. And it leads people to abortion. I mean, all of this is connected. And I saw it on my campus itself because I did my first undercover investigation, actually, of my health center. It wasn't of Planned Parenthood. It wasn't of some big national thing. It was a small investigation of the health center at UCLA. And I went in posing as myself. It was very easy. Showed my Bruin card, my student ID, and I said, I'm Lila. I think I might be pregnant, I told them. I wanted to see what they would tell me if I was pregnant, what they would tell pregnant students on my campus, because I quickly learned my first quarter of freshman year that there was a hookup culture at my school. There was partying going on. People were sleeping around. Young girls were getting to college for the first time and having sex for the first time. They're drunk or whatever, and it's just heartbreaking, and they're getting pregnant. And yet I would see not a single pregnant woman on campus. Somewhere there was a disconnect, because I knew girls in my own dorm were taking pregnancy tests, but I didn't see a single pregnant woman. What happened to those babies? What happened to those girls? And I found out quickly because the head nurse at UCLA sat me down in the counseling room, and she said, Lila, UCLA doesn't support women who are pregnant, necessarily. But we have two abortion doctors that you can see at the UCLA Medical Center, and one will be available in 2 weeks, and the other one may be available sooner. And if you don't want that listed under your parents' insurance, because I was insured under my parents, she said, we can find a way for the state of California to help take care of that. That was the choice that UCLA, the School of Empowerment, gave this student they thought was pregnant. And over 2,000 students a year who came in for pregnancy tests to that same center is a statistic. And my heart sank. And I thought, well, there's where our girls go. They go to the UCLA abortion doctor, and the state of California pays for their abortion when they don't want the parents to know, and that's what happens to these girls. Are we so surprised that our culture is full of so much darkness, the suicide rate, all of these other things, the self-harm, all of the drug abuse, the addictions? It's all connected. Because when we break away from what God's plan is, there's just brokenness and despair. Freedom is found in walking in the plan that God has for us, and following the truth that God has for each one of us. I'm gonna drink some water, hold on a sec. after that investigation, you might imagine, we released the evidence of it. We came out with the inaugural issue of Advocate, our student magazine, and we caused a bit of an uproar on campus. I was in talks with the administration about getting more pregnancy resources. I wondered if I'd get kicked out. I didn't know what would happen. But it also got my mind whirling and thinking, if this is what's happening at the UCLA Medical Center, what's happening at abortion clinics all across the country? Has anyone been outside an abortion clinic? Okay, good, most of us. Has anyone been inside an abortion clinic? A few of us. Maybe this is because we've had an abortion in our lives and now we're using that experience to try to bring other people away from that, or because we've done our own kind of research, different reasons. I had never been inside one. I'd prayed outside one since I was a teenager. And my first undercover investigation was a few months after the one at UCLA. And I had read a study that found that over 90% of Planned Parenthood clinics covered up sexual abuse. And it was done by a group out of Texas who did phone calls to 800 Planned Parenthood clinics. And they called 800 Planned Parenthood clinics posing as a 13-year-old girl on the phone, saying that they were pregnant, scared, and there was an older man involved. And over 90% of these Planned Parenthood clinics told who they thought was a 13-year-old girl on the phone that they had a don't ask, don't tell policy about sexual abuse. I read this study, and this study was back from, I think, 2002. And I read this study, and I thought, if this is true, then what is happening today? And what about the clinic close to my dorms, close to my school in Santa Monica? And so I decided I'd pose as an underage girl. I borrowed a camcorder from a friend in the dorm. I put on an old shirt. I, scrubbed off any makeup I had on. I wore some flip-flops, and I put a recorder in my blouse. And I walked into a Planned Parenthood on 3rd Street Promenade in Los Angeles, in Santa Monica. Has anyone been to 3rd Street? One of us. Okay, it's adorable. It's a tourist attraction. There's great shops. There's restaurants. It goes up to the beach where there's a Ferris wheel. But right above a coffee shop is a Planned Parenthood abortion clinic, open for business. And I walked in, and my heart's pounding. I was very nervous. I'd never done this before. And you can hear on the backdrop of the tape, of the recorder, this beating noise. It's like a soundtrack to the whole experience. And I get off the elevator, and I go up to the waiting room, and there's glass doors separating me from the waiting room. And I looked in, and there's all these women sitting there. And I remember thinking, they didn't look happy. One woman looked like she was about to cry. And I looked at them, and I thought, for some of them, I realized I wasn't just looking at one life, but that I may be looking at 2 lives. And in the clinic on that day, the cycle of death, or the appointment for death, would be begun for one of those lives. And on the wall of the clinic, it said Esperanza, or hope in Spanish. And I thought, this must be the most hopeless place in Santa Monica. Another example of Planned Parenthood's false advertising, stealing words like hope to represent what they're promoting, death. I walked up to the check-in counter. I said, can I talk to somebody? And they said, what's going on? And I said, well, I'm pregnant, I'm 15. I kind of said I was hesitant to fill out the paperwork all the way. I wanted to talk to somebody. And the Planned Parenthood staffer quickly got the cue, because it seemed like she knew what was going on. Because she said, oh, okay, let me talk to you some more. She took me behind the check-in counter, and she said, what's really going on? And I said, well, I think he's like 23, and I'm 15, and I don't want, what's going to happen, and I don't know what to do. And she said, oh, she laughed, just figure out a birth date that works, she said. Lie on the paperwork, say that you're older than you really are. Nobody needs to know about the guy, and nobody needs to know about the abortion. We won't tell anyone. That was my first piece of advice at a Planned Parenthood clinic. We won't tell anyone, lie on the paperwork. Sadly, that same advice I would hear repeated again and again and again. Because after that first investigation, on I think it was a Thursday, we went to another clinic that same day, and I'd hear my first Planned Parenthood counseling session. I was sitting down in a bigger surgical clinic right, within miles of the first one. They have many of them in Los Angeles. And the Planned Parenthood manager sat me down herself. Again, I'm nervous. I'm playing the part of the 15-year-old, and I'm sitting there with her, and she starts to give me advice.
And she said she took me on as a special case. What I'm about to share with you is a line that we've heard our investigators at other clinics. This is a sample of Planned Parenthood's counseling at their best. And she said to me, "You know what, honey? When I was 17, I got pregnant." And I said, "Really? Well, what did you do?" I'm going there, I was 15, I'm saying I'm pregnant, what did you do? And she said, "Well, it was very difficult, I was still in school, but you know what? I had my baby." And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, she had her baby? I mean, maybe she's undercover at the clinic doing pro-life counseling, and I'm undercover at the clinic pretending I'm getting an abortion, and who's gonna blink first? We're both undercover, this is great, she had her baby. And trying not to be too excited or anything, I said, you had your baby? And she said, "Yes, but if I could do it again, I would do it very differently. If I could do it again, I would not continue the pregnancy. And my son, he's 16 now. But kids cost a lot. He's still living at home." If she could do it again, she was telling me she would go back in time and kill her now 16-year-old son. I hope that the story was made up, that there wasn't ever a son and it was a tactic to get me to have the abortion. Who knows? But again, I saw, and my heart just broke in that waiting room. I saw that what we're up against, this culture of death, which is that that disrespect for the unborn child does not stop with the unborn child, but it extends beyond the child, to the woman, to the young woman, to even other people's children, to one's own children. You cannot limit it, that evil, that disrespect to just the unborn child, but it extends beyond it. After those first 2 investigations, long story short, we put them up on YouTube, which was just new, but this was about 5 years ago, it was new. We put it up there, I was excited to share it with people. I thought, now people will know the truth about Planned Parenthood, they'll see the truth about abortion, this is so exciting. And the first day, we had about 100 views on the YouTube video, and about 50 were from me, clicking refresh in my dorm room, and 50 were from my mom in San Jose, clicking refresh at our kitchen table. And then a couple days later, it was at about 1,000 views, and I thought, this is awesome. People are watching these undercover videos, they're seeing the truth. And then about 5 days later, it was at over 20,000 views. And I was so ecstatic. I thought, people are seeing the truth, and the blogs are picking it up. And then about day 6, I got an email from Planned Parenthood between classes. And it said, "Dear Miss Rose, Planned Parenthood of Los Angeles recently became aware of the videos that you posted on YouTube.com. These videos violate the privacy of Planned Parenthood of Los Angeles employees. If you do not immediately remove these videos, we will sue you for $5,000 for each offense and pursue a full range of civil and legal penalties against you. Sincerely, Planned Parenthood." And I sat at my desk thinking, I don't even have $200 in my bank account right now. And also thinking, what is happening here? And I was half scared, half nervous, half unsure what to do. And then I turned to God, which is what we're supposed to do. And I said, "God, what is this all about? What should I do?" And I was reminded in that moment that this was fear on the part of Planned Parenthood. They were afraid of the truth that those videos showed and exposed. And within a few days, God does what he always does. God did what he always does, which was use this challenge. I saw it at first as a challenge, as a huge opportunity. And those videos, after I got some pro bono legal help, those videos were aired for millions to see on the O'Reilly Factor, and I got to share this story for the country to hear. And of course, that's how God works. Again and again, any challenge that we face mysteriously becomes a way for God to show his power and to use all things for good. And that's what's promised to us in Romans, that God will work all things for the good of those that love him. And it's true, I've seen it again and again in my life, and it's when faith is weak and we say, my faith is weak, help me see, God again empowers, God again strengthens our faith and gives us again the hope to continue on the path he has us on. And that's a story in pro-life work. Never give up. We don't know what's going to happen this election. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 4 years, what's going to happen in the next endless years in our country. We don't know what the future holds. And regardless of who's elected, our work is cut out for us. But that's where it's more important than ever to rely on God for everything that we need and never give up in this fight for life. Because there's so much progress that has already been made and so many more lives and souls to touch and to help, so many more than we can imagine. And God has it already all planned out, and he's inviting us every day to be a part of his plan. After those first investigations, I was, me and some friends, we were very excited. We thought this is such a powerful way to expose the truth, to get coverage, to get people thinking and talking. And on campus, everyone was talking about the videos, and there was so much discussion. I mean, the controversy brought so much wonderful discussion to happen. And so that led me to, for the next 4 years, throughout my college, going to class, going to, getting involved on campus. But then also, I started to do more traveling and more investigations. And the following summer, with a team of about 4 people, I bleached my hair platinum blonde, because not for fun, but they had my photo up like a wanted poster on their clinic walls. I guess I could say I'm flattered to say. And so I bleached my hair platinum blonde, brought along another friend to do investigations as well, and we started to travel the country to document the sexual abuse cover-up. And again, we found it in state after state, clinic after clinic, this callous disregard for mandatory reporting laws for sexual abuse, which is what the clinics were breaking, and the cover-up of the sexual abuse of these very young girls. Again, this deep connection between abortion and sexual abuse cover-up. After those investigations, we found out that they put my photo up as a blonde next to the brunette photo. We had sent in some people. So I thought, I can go red next, or I can, work on training other folks to do this work. And that's what Live Action has grown into today, is continuing to aggressively use the media contacts we've built, the distribution channels we've built. Our Facebook is bigger than Planned Parenthood's. We're, 0.01% of their budget. We have 400,000 fans just on Facebook. And most of them are young people. And the momentum that's out there of young people who identify with this love of life and want life to be meaningful and want to protect life for those that are the weakest among us, it's amazing, it's exciting. And so many more people, I believe, in their hearts, when they think about it, they contemplate it, it resonates with them. And that's why the polls are saying more people are pro-life than pro-choice. All the latest polling suggests this. And one of the biggest demographics is pro-lifers that are young people, the young demographic. It's a very exciting statistic. A quick rundown, I'm going to show you a video in just a moment, one of our latest investigative video, but over the years we continue to build our sexual abuse cover-up investigation. Planned Parenthood is a billion-dollar organization. Almost $500 million right now comes from the government, and they commit almost 1/3 of abortions in our country, over 320,000. There are other abortion clinics that Live Action also investigates, but Planned Parenthood, in their political power, has become one of the biggest international proponents and national proponents of abortion. They fight against every restriction on abortion, every regulation. They talk about abortion as if it's somehow good for women, good for American families, that this is Planned Parenthood. It's completely opposite, as we know. That's why we're all here. And they're also pushing radical sexual agenda on our young people, especially from kindergarten onwards. They get them younger and younger, trying to push away parents, get parents and the parent-child relationship, where the safe place where children should learn about sex and marriage and the future and all these things, and they want to become the sexual educators of children. And so they're partnering with government organizations to build the sex education curriculum for young people, encouraging sexual promiscuity, encouraging dangerous sexual behaviors, encouraging, have sex whenever you're ready. It doesn't need to be when you're married. It doesn't need to be whatever. As long as you're taking hormonal contraception, pumping your body with what the World Health Organization has called a Class 1 carcinogen, as long as you're taking this, you will be safe. This is safe sex, they say, which is yet another lie. Because we know, and the stories of millions of women who have had abortions after sex that often left them feeling heartbroken, and the heartbreak they feel on and on in their lives because of those losses. I mean, the people around us, the suffering that's around us, the suffering maybe in our own lives, it's unspeakable. And yet this is what this organization and their friends and their political friends are promoting every day. The video that we just released recently, and before this one we had out a sexual trafficking investigation. You may have seen it. We had a manager, one of Planned Parenthood's managers on tape, encouraging the sexual trafficking of 14-year-old girls in New Jersey. We released 6 other tapes like this. It led to the first ever defunding in Congress and the House of Representatives. I mean, it was a step in the right direction. And earlier this year, we released more videos showing Planned Parenthood aiding and abetting sex-selective abortions, targeting little girls for termination just because they were girls. I mean, you think this happens in India or China. We may have heard about it, you know, the war on baby girls and how in China they're killing off so many girls. There's a demographic imbalance in the population. There's so many more men than girls, and they're running into even economic problems because of this. They're targeting little girls. Well, it's happening here in the United States as well, among certain communities. And Planned Parenthood is saying, well, it's your choice. If you want to kill the baby because it's a girl, go for it. And we got that on tape. And President Obama even came out, this was this last June, when Live Action was releasing these videos, came out and made a statement saying that he opposed the ban on sex-selective abortion. He thinks it should be legal, acceptable, protected for women, for men to coerce women to have sex-selective abortions that target little girls. I mean, this is a ban that's even in the UK and Australia. Even India is banning this, where the struggle is big. But the president came out to comment on this and say that he opposed the ban. I mean, this is the political situation that we have in the United States right now. The video I'm about to share with you is our latest investigation from our partner organization, Live Action Advocate. And this gives us a little more ability to get involved during an election time. But the video documents the abuse of abortion and how it hurts women physically, their physical safety, and the lies that are being told about that. So we can play that video now.
Thanks to all of you at Planned Parenthood for all the work that you are doing for women all across the country and for families all across the country.
Virginia Beach 911, where's the emergency?
We have a patient that's bleeding.
Is this at Planned Parenthood?
Planned Parenthood.
Watch her consciousness and breathing and let me know if she is unconscious or stops breathing, okay?
Okay, so the ambulance needs to come to the back door.
So they need to use the back door?
Yep.
We'll have the officers respond out to 515 Newtown Road to Planned Parenthood, and they'll use the back door.
Hi, is this Planned Parenthood?
Yes, it is.
I'm just calling about making an appointment for abortion. Has anyone been hurt? Like, has anyone had a problem after having one?
I mean, you have some cramping, you have some bleeding. You know, some people think that, you know, that sometimes you can have severe cramping afterwards. You try like a warm compress on your stomach or, you know, some ibuprofen.
But is it dangerous?
No, ma'am.
Not at all?
No, ma'am.
So I'm not going to get, like, hurt or anything at the clinic?
No, ma'am.
Both of the procedures are safe and effective.
Nobody has been hurt at the clinic, right?
Correct.
There's a lot of misinformation about abortions online. It's very safe, and the doctors are very skilled at what they do.
Okay. So nobody gets hurt? Or nobody's gotten hurt?
No.
With either of the procedures, has anybody ever gotten hurt?
They're both incredibly safe.
They're not in danger. They don't get, like, injured.
No, ma'am. We don't have any type of procedure where one would receive an injury.
During the procedure, I'm not going to get hurt either at the clinic.
No.
Houston Fire and Medical, what is the location of your emergency?
It's Planned Parenthood.
And what is your emergency?
We have a client here. She's in a procedure room. She may be hemorrhaging.
We are dispatching emergencies at Planned Parenthood on the 3rd floor.
Is it safe?
Yes, it's safe.
Well, has anybody gotten hurt because of having an abortion?
Again, it's a very safe environment. It's very clean.
So no one's ever been hurt at your clinic?
No.
That's why I know that Planned Parenthood will continue providing care no matter what. I know you'll never stop fighting to protect the health care and the choices that America's women deserve.
This video, of course, is just a sampling, and I talked to you a little bit about some of the other things that we've been exposing and have been exposed about Planned Parenthood and abortion clinics. I want to share one more story with you. I was undercover, posing as, I think, 13-year-old Brianna. This was a few years ago, and I was sitting in a clinic waiting room, and it was a clinic waiting room for children, for women women with children. And I was there with my investigative partner because we were doing a drop-in, so they put us here. And we weren't alone. 2 women walked in, and they had 2 little girls with them. And the women were sisters, and these little girls were beautiful, maybe 5 and 7 years old. And they went to go play with a pile of brightly colored toys that Planned Parenthood had for women with children. They had another waiting room for women where no children were allowed, and there were about 30 women in there waiting for their abortions. And this little girl is, these little girls are playing, and I turn over to the woman sitting near to me, and I could tell she was there for abortion. She looked like she was pregnant. And so I turned to her and I said, even though I was, playing Brianna, I wanted to talk to her. I wanted to see if there was a way to get her to leave, because I thought, this baby is in this room and maybe I could get her to leave, even though I'm doing this investigation. So I turned to her and I said, what are you here for? And she said, abortion. And I said, well, why don't we both just get out of here and go with those people that were outside, those people that said there was another clinic we could go to? Because there had been sidewalk counselors on the sidewalk with outstretched arms saying, we're here for you and your baby. We'll take you to the clinic, the pregnancy center that was down the street. And the woman turned to me and she said, stop talking to me. And she looked at the ground. Then the little 4-year-old, 4 or 5-year-old, she jumps up and she's looking for attention. She goes over to her mother who's reading a magazine, and she's asking for a cup of water to drink some water, and the mother's kind of ignoring her. And then she goes over to the other woman that had just said, stop talking to me, and she was calling her auntie, auntie, and trying to get her attention, and she was pulling on her pants and saying auntie, and her aunt is just looking at the ground, looking very sad. And then this beautiful little girl jumps up into her aunt's lap and snuggles close to her aunt's stomach. And I looked and I realized that I was looking at the meeting of 2 cousins separated by just inches of flesh. And that little girl might never get to know who was behind that wall, her little boy or girl cousin, because on that day in that clinic, that little child would be killed. A couple seconds later, I was called for my appointment. I left, and by the time I'd gotten back, well over an hour, she was gone. I never know what happened. I never will know what happened. If that little girl was lost, we don't know. But I'll always remember looking at this girl cuddling close to her aunt's stomach. And it reminds me that no matter how much abortion becomes politicized, partisanships, how much people make this an issue, a cause, all of these words we use for it, we talk about it, we have come together for conferences for it. This is something that affects all of us personally, whether we like it or not. Sometimes because we're missing people in our own families, we're missing sons or daughters, we're missing brothers or sisters, cousins, we're missing grandchildren, we're missing classmates, we're missing people in our workplaces, people in our churches. We're missing people all over our country, almost a third of my generation, because of abortion. And the cost of that, we can't even fathom the cost of that, and how many tears that brings God, who loved each one of those little children into life and gave them as a gift to the world. But they never had a chance to reach out and to touch the world, as each one of us here do have that chance. St. Augustine says, I want to leave you with a beautiful thought from St. Augustine. And he says that people travel the world to marvel at the height of mountains, at the vast course of rivers, at the circular motion of the stars, at the huge oceans, the powerful ocean, and yet people pass by themselves without wondering. How wonderful, St. Augustine is saying, is the human person. How wonderful is each one of us. How wonderful is this beautiful cause that we fight for, the life of each other. And when we get to work, come what may, no matter who's elected after this November, and either way who's elected, we have our work cut out for us. I would say let's never forget what a beautiful thing we're fighting for. And let's reflect it in each one of our lives. And let's never get discouraged or disturbed by any of the things that might come at us or we might face. But remember that this is, in the end, this is God's battle. And God loves us so much and loves each one of these children so much. And he will not leave us alone in this fight, but he will aid us in every bit of everything that we need. He will aid us all the way to the victory. I firmly believe we will see victory. I believe we will see a day in our country when every life is coming. I believe it's coming soon. And as we together in this room keep up our work from Louisiana into all of the rest of the country, I believe that day when every child is protected is coming soon. We're going to see it in our lifetimes. We're going to see it very soon. Thank you so much for having me here this afternoon. Thank you.